Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday morning for discussion on music and its impact on the brain, and really to understand some of the neuroscience behind why music does what it does. What we'll do is start basically with our introductions and understanding then in terms of music. So we'll have a very short music piece, and then go into some of the neuroscience behind sound, but also from an Indian classical music perspective. And we'll actually end with music as well. So it's going to be a combination of everything, and we hope to have time for questions at the end as well. What I'd like you, for those who have worksheets, you can answer on the sheet, but even if you don't, this was just basically a framework for how we can think through things. So before I even start with the introductions, I wanted you to just either, like I say, either answer it or mentally. If I had to ask you now, do you feel connected as a whole to the people in this room? Yes or no? So yes, okay, let's go with no. Who doesn't feel connected to the people in this room? Right? I mean, I would assume it's yes, most of you not. And there's a reason I'm asking this. Do you feel like you belong? Is there a sense of belonging at this point in time, in this space, in this group? Do you feel like you belong? So yes, raise your hands. That is so interesting. For my experiment, I wanted no, but we'll have to go with yes. And how many of you are familiar with Indian classical music? Excellent. And how many have heard it but are not very familiar? So you have some sort of introduction to Indian classical. Perfect. Okay, thank you for that. That's just going to help us as we go forward, and it will hopefully become apparent as we do this. For introductions, I'm Dr. Kirti Ranchod. I am a neurologist, and in neurology, I look at the brain and how we can keep the brain healthy. What are the different activities that we have? What are the tools that we can use? How do we reduce the risk of certain illnesses like Alzheimer's disease, which is how I started looking at it, but also other illnesses like depression, anxiety, stroke. And more than that, because the brain is absolutely incredible, and I'm biased given my training, but how do we actually get the brain to do what we want it to do? How do we optimize function in a sense? And music is one of those powerful tools that can actually help us on many of those different levels. This series of talks that I do at the Origin Center actually focuses on our cultural capital. So what do we have within our traditions, our cultures, our communities, our families, that can actually support brain health and mental wellness in different ways. So much of what we do, we assume comes from somewhere else. But as I was reading all these articles that were published, I was like, well, there's a lot that we actually have rooted in my culture and the cultures that I'm surrounded by here in Johannesburg that would support brain health in many, many different ways. And this got reinforced when I actually did my fellowship in Dublin in terms of the wealth of knowledge that we have, and how do we start looking at it differently, how do we start investing in this as a resource, and how do we start including it in our discussions on health. Today I am joined by musician Rabin Ram, who is an excellent musician playing the Sarod, one of the only people in South Africa with expertise in terms of playing this instrument, and I'm going to hand over to Rabin for the introduction.
Thank you, Kirti. It's an absolute pleasure being here and seeing all of you on this beautiful Saturday morning. Not much of an introduction. I think as we talk about music, we may kind of touch on why we get into music and why we play music. So I actually started learning from a gentleman called Jairam Bana in Lenasia. He used to be based at the Tolstoy farm where Gandhiji used to live. And I used to play the violin at that point in time. I went to South India, Chennai, and I spent a year with a wonderful teacher learning South Indian music on the violin. And when I came back to South Africa, I brought a Sarod with me. And once I started playing this, I just kind of stuck to it, and I don't play any other instrument anymore other than the Sarod. So my background prior to going to India is that we were very much into jazz, you know, the John Coltrane, Miles Davis, that kind of thing. Because we came from Town, that's where we were born. So the local jazz and the wonderful jazz musicians that we were privileged to listen to kind of introduced us into music. And then as we got further into jazz and we understood that John Coltrane himself went to learn from Ravi Shankar because he was very interested in how Indian musicians improvise. And that led me to, and my brothers, I have two younger brothers who also play, that led us to doing a bit of research into why John Coltrane particularly went to go and listen to how Indian music is improvised. And that's how we got into Indian music. So that's it in terms of introduction. And thank you, Kirti, for having me. I really appreciate that. And I hope we can do justice to this first session. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabin. What we're going to start with is actually two pieces of music. So we're going to, Rabin's going to play the first piece. We're going to pause. As he's playing it, what I want you to do is just listen with awareness on what you're feeling, potentially what you're thinking, and what you're remembering. That was it. What I would like is somebody to volunteer. What were you thinking about? What were you feeling? Was there any memory? Otherwise, I'm going to pick on my family, so let's not do this to them. Yes, please.
There's a bass note going on, and then the overtone above it, and it always seems to come back to a center point. And the gliding, the standard movement of the instrument, and for me, it just brought me back to a center point always. So whatever else is going on can come back to it.
Perfect. So we have actually a sense of centering. For how many people was this discord, not harmony? Raise your hands. You can't say it. There's no right or wrong. This is my experiment. Yes, no?
So there was a discord, but it always came back.
Two, yeah. And for how many people was it harmony? Or how many people not sure? So how many people harmony? Okay, how many people not sure? Okay, so majority. Perfect. Okay. Next piece. Those be doing the same thing. Next piece.
You said it really well.
Yeah.
We come back to the bass, which is the main note, the tonic of this instrument. So actually what I was doing there, I was just tuning it. So now we'll try and play something for you.
this experiment to work, there's only one right answer now. How many felt more of a sense of harmony now? Yeah, I mean, it was a loaded question. But music basically can shift mood, shift the way we think, and I'm hoping that these two different pieces of music actually illustrated that. So what I'd like is somebody to volunteer, somebody who's familiar with this piece of music, to actually let us know what you felt or what memories it evoked. So if somebody could volunteer who is familiar with this piece of music. Yes.
I'm not familiar
Yes.
with that piece, but it gave me a sense of reconnecting.
A sense of?
Reconnecting with myself.
Reconnecting with yourself. Excellent. Any specific memories that came forward?
Well, more spiritual connection of the paths that the various people follow. It brought me to that point.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else want to volunteer a memory or a thought or a feeling that this piece of music actually... Yes.
So for me, it was almost a stillness. I'm familiar with the genre of beauty, but it was a complete focus and a stillness, not a distortion or any other thought, but a focus.
Perfect. So focus, stillness, not a specific thought, no specific memory per se. Memory of previous spiritual experiences or spiritual guides. If somebody, yes. Yes.
I think for me it was a sense of connection. The memory that came back to me was the first time I stepped into my aunt's prayer room and she had that exact same song. And there's this weird sense of belonging to me, like this is exactly what it is.
Perfect. So specific memory linked to your aunt and listening to this in that space and the memory of her and who she is. Yes. Perfect. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? I'll take one more. Yes.
So I found myself trying to relate it to music I know.
Yes.
And the slides are very much like you hear in some blues guitar. And I then started listening to, is there anything else that sounds like that? I don't think so. but there is a similarity. There is something about the way it's made.
Okay. So trying to relate to previous music. And was there any specific memory? So even if you were trying to relate it to something in specific, did something come up in terms of your memory, in terms of something you played or of a particular emotion linked to this, even if you weren't familiar? What was that?
Yeah, I enjoy that music. That relationship.
Right, so you did actually remember music that you enjoyed because of the feeling that this one evoked. Okay.
And not just the feeling, also the visual of how you can.
Right.
Because I play that really. Can watch
Perfect.
trying to watch the hand. That's interesting.
Thank you. So this helps us to understand what music does to the brain. What does music do to the brain? It's activating specific parts when we listen to music, and music that we're familiar with and music that we're unfamiliar with are slightly different, but there's also a commonality. So given what people said, what do you think? What does music do to the brain? We all know this actually. Yes?
I just wanted to add that I had a bit of an ASMR response, but it felt like the strumming was massaging parts of the brain. So there was like a physical sensation of like different parts of the brain getting soothed. It was sort of like a similarly meditative state of stillness, but there was a physical sensation of my brain seemed to be stimulated and relaxed at the same time.
Well said. So the brain stimulated and relaxed at the same time, which is in a sense what it's doing. So one of the first things that it does is it activates a part of the brain called the hippocampus, which I like to think of as a campus of hippos, but it's actually related to a Latin word, and it means a seahorse, because I still think rather imaginative pathologists looked under a microscope and could see a seahorse. Hippopotamus is a river horse, for curiosity, just as an interesting. So it activates the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the part of the brain that is responsible for memory. So when we listen to music, we actually have memories evoked at the same time. So whether the music is something that we're familiar with and have heard before, if we are, there's a very strong association, and it will take you directly back in time, so it helps to transport us to that specific feeling, emotion, memory, person, place. But even if we are unfamiliar with the music, it's still evoking a memory because that part of the brain is activated. Now, it doesn't always do this. There's some music that you just feel completely dissociated from. But often this is what music does. So you're going to have memories or trying to relate it to some experience, and it's a subconscious process. We're not in control of it. So as you listen, this is what's going to happen. Which is why sometimes, even if you're listening this happens to me often, I assume it happens to everybody, maybe not true. But if I do go out and I'm listening to classical music, I start daydreaming and wondering, but what it's actually doing is stimulating that part of the brain that encourages this in a sense, those memories linked to the music. The second thing that it does is it helps us to process emotions. So listening to music, and again, it is particular to different people, and it really is important about understanding the impact that specific music has on you versus me saying this is the best music that there is. Music activates the limbic system in the brain, and the limbic system is important in emotional processing. So what they found is that in musicians, this part of the brain obviously is more developed. So potentially helping musicians to process emotions differently in terms of dealing with life emotions. And I do wonder on some level then, is it some sort of subconscious therapist in a way, something that we don't have to think about, but helps us to process these emotions depending on the music that we select. I'm going to leave it there for now in terms of the neuroscience. I'm going to invite Rabin just to share his thoughts on terms of sound and what he was playing.
Thanks, Kirti. That was so beautifully said. I mean, you're not leaving much for me to say. But, so the piece that I played is a piece called Vaishnava Janato, which is a devotional piece. Okay? And I chose it particularly because it was one of Mahatma Gandhi's favorite devotional songs. And we know that Mahatma Gandhi had a huge and intimate relationship with South Africa. I mean, this is where his philosophy of satyagraha or non-violence was born. And he then took that to India, and that's how India became independent from the British. So there's a connection, and I thought I'll play that piece for you. So we had some really good feedback in terms of what you found with that piece, but that's what it was. So I think today is a really special day. I mean, Kirti chose this beautiful day to have the session. In the Indian calendar, it's a very, very auspicious day. It's what we call Guru Purnima. Guru being teacher, Purnima being a full moon. So the first full moon in July, we celebrate Guru Purnima. And what we celebrate is all the teachers that have taught us everything that we know. All that we know, we've learned from someone. And this is the day to worship your teacher and to say thank you for, giving us the knowledge that you've given us. Everything that we're going to talk about comes from, people, teachers. None of it comes from us. So in India, we talk about Nada Brahma. Nada means the sound. Brahma, some people would say is God, but it's more than that. It's more like the universe. So we say that the universe is made of sound. All ancient wisdom traditions would agree with that. I mean, they regard music, sound as being the fundamental stuff of the universe, right? In the East in particular, people talk about sound as being the ground of all being, that everything emanates from sound. So when we hear the scientists talking about the Big Bang, that bang represents some kind of sound. So it all started there, really, if you think about it. And interesting, archaeologists say that some of the oldest artifacts that they found were musical instruments. So this music has been with us forever, right? Being part of sound, which is the fundamental stuff of what we are, we should not be surprised. And then more recently, if you look at some of the scientific guys like Albert Einstein and Nikola Tesla, whether they did this independently or whether they did it collaborating with each other, I really don't know. But both of them said that everything that we see, that everything in the universe is composed of just three things, constructed of just three things, and that is energy, vibration, and frequency. So everything that we see, they said, is energy, vibration, and frequency. Now relating that to music, I mean, energy, if you pluck a string on that instrument, some energy going in there, the string vibrates, and that's what vibrates the air that reaches your eardrum. That's how you can hear the sound. And the frequency will be the note that's played, particular frequency. So C on this instrument, if I play the C string, you'll hear a C frequency, right? If I play the G string, actually G string is not the right word. If I play the A string, it will vibrate at A440 hertz. So very interesting that, they said these things about sound. Pythagoras, in fact, predating these guys, he basically said that heavenly bodies and music are governed by the same mathematical laws. Believe that or not. I mean, we have a very short session here, and we probably need an expert to come and talk to us a little bit more about that. But it's interesting that he did say that. Now, in the East, we talk about two kinds of sounds, right? We talk about sound that's created by vibration of the air, and then we talk about sound that's caused by vibration of ether. So sound that's created by vibration of the air is what we can hear. And as human beings, we have a certain range that we can hear, a certain range of frequency, which gives us the music that we can listen to. But there is audible or manifest sound, if you like, that we can't hear. Like a dog whistle is a common example. The dog can hear a dog whistle, but we will not be able to hear it because it's beyond our frequency, beyond our range. To talk about the unmanifest, I think we might touch on that a bit later. It's quite a deep subject, but maybe we'll get a chance just to touch on it. So what is music really? I mean, we're talking about sound. Music is really using sound through a ritual called performance to produce music. So music, in fact, then arises from such fundamental a source that it is basically parallel to life, And as musicians, I mean, we say that music comes through you and not from you. There's nothing that you can do with sound to create anything that's not already created, that's not already there. So as a conduit, what you do is you basically allow this music to come through you. So I think I'm going to leave it for there for now, Kirti.
You want to start in terms of the music and illness that you...
I can do that. See, the doctor talks off the cuff. The patient needs the notes. So just to talk about music, call it illness, but maybe you should call it music and healing. The first question that comes to mind, and it's a question to you really, or a question to us, should I say, is what music should you listen to, I mean, what is the music that you should listen to as an individual? We heard about the Mozart effect. I mean, Donald Campbell rather, did a lot of research and published something called the Mozart effect and has done a lot of work on this aspect since. And the idea then was that when you listen to Mozart, it does something to your brain that kind of enhances your mood and your learning capacity and everything else. So we were encouraged to play Mozart in the background whilst the children were doing homework. We were also, those of us who could have background music at work, they said, play some Mozart. And I think that's very powerful. I mean, Mozart is one of the greatest composers ever. We absolutely love his music, and we listen to him as often as we can. But there is some further research since then, and there's two people, scientists, one by the name of Yonitani and Tsugaya, both, I think, Japanese, who published a paper that says that the music that you like is the music that your brain likes. Now, that shouldn't be surprising because it is your own brain, for that matter. And the kind of research that they did is they basically looked at patients who had dementia and particularly Alzheimer's. And what they found is that, particularly with Alzheimer patients, they responded really well to music that they used to listen to prior to the onset of the illness. So that memory of the music was still there, and they responded really well to that music. And if you played any other music, the response was different and it was not as positive. So they basically give us some advice, and they say, you should listen to the music that you like, whether it's pop, jazz, classical, music from other traditions, music from other countries. listen to the music that you like, because your brain is going to really appreciate that, and that's going to be really good for you. Okay, we have to give that a go, and maybe when we meet next time we can discuss that further. So since sound is so much part of the fabric of life, it is not surprising that musical notes are mapped to key aspects of our being. So I just want to pause there. I don't know if you've given out the chakras thing. It is,
Yeah.
Okay.
So some of you will have a document that basically has the chakras and sound. So why don't I actually finish with those aspects and then we'll go through this. Okay. So we'll come through to the chakras next. I just wanted to complete the circle in terms of how we look at music and health, and music and Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and aspects that Rabin had referenced speaking now. So first, looking at Alzheimer's disease, which, as I explained, is how I started first in this field of brain health. How do we reduce risk in terms of how do we reduce risk so that you can reduce your risk of getting Alzheimer's disease? But even if you have Alzheimer's disease, how do we help you to actually slow progression down or live in a way that is meaningful to you? So the research does show that music is quite phenomenal. So the music we love to listen to is really hardwired in the brain, and irrespective of stage of illness, the music that you are familiar with will reconnect you with that part of yourself. So whether it's your childhood, whatever happy memories there are or sad memories, but listening to that music that you have that strong association with is going to transport you back to that place in time. So for me, it's going to be Sunday Bloody Sunday on a Sunday morning at my grandmother's house. Despite all this work I do, that's the music it's going to be you too. But yes, it is really quite hardwired in the brain. But we do actually learn as we go along, and we have different influences, and understanding that we can then structure in terms of what we listen to and how this can then potentially help our mood. So we do have a crisis currently also in terms of mental health and mental wellness, and this is in part what these walkabouts also focus on. We're not walking today. But we can then select specific music to potentially elevate mood. So if we consciously select, understanding our memory, our association with the music, our association with a positive experience, not that we should avoid the negative processing, the negative emotions, sadness, that's not what I'm saying at all. But we are able then to select specific music, put us in the right frame of mood, and as Rabin mentioned, this actually changes brain performance, right? So the way we feel influences what we are thinking, and it influences how we behave. So changing what we listen to has the potential to change what we do and how effective we are at problem solving, creativity, memory. And it's phenomenal just to understand the power of music to do that. I come back to what you had mentioned in terms of the first piece of music taking you back to a point of focus. So music can be used to help us to study, to learn, to remember at different points in our lives differently. I used music throughout my medical school career, and even actually in high school, not understanding the neuroscience behind it, but once I heard the neuroscience, I was like, oh, yes, that makes perfect sense. So I always had music playing, very specific music. And again, this is individual, so you'd have to experiment and understand. But what music does is it activates a network in the brain called the salience network. Salience network doing what it does. It helps us in the setting where there's perhaps noise in the background, there's pages being turned, and other distractions. It helps you to focus on what is salient in your environment. So potentially then helping the learning process. So selecting the right type of music activates that network and helps you to focus better. And this can be music, it can be sound, you can construct it in terms of that. The last aspect of this that I'm going to discuss now is actually the concept of plasticity. And it comes back to reducing the risk of Alzheimer's disease and other illnesses such as depression as well. So playing music in particular has been shown to actually increase plasticity. I don't know if we have to play well or not. I'm assuming not, but I think it's about the process of learning. But what it does is it activates a specific gene. This gene secretes a chemical called brain-derived neurotropic factor. In essence, a brain growth factor. So there was a very small study looking at twins, one twin who played music and one twin who does not play music. And the twin who actually played music, this part of the brain is better developed, and they had a reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease. So quite profound in terms of the impact and in terms of plasticity. And we have this ability in terms of the plastic ability of the brain throughout life. It is more efficient when we are children and we are learning so much, but it actually is present throughout life. So the point is, if anybody wants to learn to play the Sarod, and if Rabin is actually, generous enough, we can actually still start playing now, and it's going to have a positive impact, not just on your brain, but on your memory, on how you age, on your mood, and your risk of various brain illnesses, in a sense. Okay, we're now going to go on to some of the aspects with regard to chakra and sound. Rabin.
Okay, so I think you may have a chart, or you're sharing a chart, that basically maps musical notes to various areas of life. So the first line you see there are the notes in Western notation, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Those of you who are musicians, you're very familiar with that. The next line is the Indian notes, or the Indian syllables for those notes, Sa, Re, Ga, Ma, Pa, Da, Ni. And then the next two lines, firstly, energy chakras. I'm not spending too much time on this because time is a bit limited. Energy centers, and then chakras, an area of life. So C basically relates to the root chakra, which is the Muladhara chakra, which is at the bottom of the spine. And it's basically talks about being grounded. And then if you move all across to the right, we have the B note, which is basically the crown chakra, which is here, called the Sahasrara chakra. And that basically relates to spirit and spirituality. So progression from C to B.
Oh, you can't hear?
No. So if you wouldn't mind just moving the mic a little higher, just so that people
Okay, is that a bit better? Sorry about that. Okay, so and then if we look at colors and the meaning of those colors and hierarchy at the next session, you'll see that C is red, which is strength, and moves all the way to violet on the right, which is spirituality, but everything else in between, colors of the rainbow. And then from a hierarchical point of view, if I could call it that, it moves from the physical, which is the ground note. We keep coming back to the C, basically, which grounds you, right, and grounds every piece that you play, and you pick that up. Moving from the physical right up to inspiration, peace, and healing on the right-hand side. In terms of elements, earth, water, air, fire, and ether, we're all familiar with, and none of the other two. And surprisingly, notes have fragrances. So I've just chosen one fragrance. Cloves for C, sandalwood for D, etc. And then rosewood on the other end for B. So it's very interesting. I mean, there's a bit more to be said about this maybe at another session, or you can do some research. I mean, if you use Google later, I mean, it's full of the stuff, right? What is interesting when you talk about notes? Someone asked the question, what is very special about the A note that vibrates at 432 hertz. Now, hertz will be frequency, a frequency, and normally, if you look at the piano, those of you who are familiar with the piano, you'll have middle C, and then from middle C, if you go to the A above middle C, that is normally tuned at A440. And there was some universal agreement that that's what it should be, so orchestras can all tune to the same and have a common kind of understanding of tuning and frequency. But recently there's been a lot of work about 432 rather than 440. And 432 nowadays is known as the note that connects you to the universe. So there are many people who now play their music in 432 instead of 440. Now, I can't tune my instrument to 432, it will be a bit dull. That instrument is basically manufactured to work at A440. And then even more interesting, right? somebody asked, what is the note that you can call the God note? And that is a note that vibrates at 963 hertz, which on your chart will be the B, right at the end, right on the right-hand side. And it relates to the crown chakra and to spirituality. So it kind of all falls in. And if you look at 423 and you add those numbers, it comes to 9. You add 963, it comes to 18. 1 plus 8 becomes 9. So 9 is a very significant number. And as you know, Tesla talked a lot about 369 being magical numbers, right? So it's all kind of coming together. The frequency of the universe, the 432, is also known as the miracle tone. A lot of people call it the miracle tone. And what is interesting is that apparently that tone resonates really well with our physicality, with our bodies. And Mozart's music often was at 432, right? And surprisingly, Jimi Hendrix, I'm sure some of you know Jimi Hendrix, the fantastic guitarist, he played at 432 often. So there's something to be said about that. And we move on to the music next.
Thanks. So as I started, I was discussing about what we have within our traditions and our cultures, the depth, the wealth of knowledge within an Indian cultural system, and as I've said, you know, the many cultures that we are surrounded by here in South Africa and in Johannesburg. And if you look at that panel in the corner there, what it's actually illustrating is a trance dance. And there's a beautiful video upstairs as well that goes through the trance dance. Now, what's phenomenal about this is the use of music, dance, so sound dance, with a specific process. This is not done in isolation. There's often fasting and other sacred traditions that will precede the actual trance dance. But with this knowledge, they are able to actually shift into a different reality without the use of drugs, right? We know people who use this, who access these different states with drugs. But here's a knowledge system that understood how to change reality using sound, using rhythm, using dance, using community. Now that is absolutely phenomenal in terms of an understanding of the brain, of us, and how the brain actually functions. Now, there's often a tension between these different knowledge systems, right? If I study medicine and I bring chakras into a medical school class, it is not going to be very well received for the most part. And these spaces allow us to actually look at these different knowledge systems from these different traditions. How do we understand the wealth of this knowledge in these different systems and find ways of working with respect and with some sort of cohesion, even if integration is not always possible? One of the other panels is over here and there, where they show the separation now from quite a natural environment to actually a state of being confined in a school learning environment and being in a hospital to access health care. Both in terms of formal systems are necessary and essential, but in part it means we forget the informal, how we learn from each other, from our grandparents, from our parents, from our uncles, from our cousins. How we learn about health and how to keep ourselves healthy in different settings. And what are we doing as a whole if we exclude what we don't look at as within the health system? So I've just explained how music has such a profound impact on the brain. And we have these different musical traditions. And if we started looking at this as a resource for health, what would change in our approaches to actually support better health going forward? And how do we work across these different knowledge systems is where the challenge, the tension, and the opportunity actually is. What we're going to do now is we're going to actually listen to music, but before that, I'm going to ask just for a few questions, and we will take questions at the end. So maybe 2 questions now. Any questions? Yes, Bunny.
About playing music
Yes.
being helpful for brain health, how does singing come into the picture? So if it's not instrumental.
Singing would be as useful as playing an instrument. It's just that you're using a different instrument in a sense, and different parts of the brain would develop, but there's a common core in terms of what develops in the brain when we learn music as a whole, not necessarily an instrument. But for example, if you learn to play the piano, the parts of the brain that are important in finger coordination would develop more than when you learn to sing, and that would be then vocal cords, those parts of the brain that are controlling that aspect of your brain, basically. So whatever you do shapes your brain and shapes your experience of the world, in a sense. And yes?
Have you done any research on the solfeggio frequencies? I know you alluded to it briefly, but there are 9 solfeggio frequencies which each have a specific algorithm. There's very limited research on it. Have you any research on it or access to it?
I personally not. Do you, Rabin?
Yeah, not. I think from our point of view, I mean, from an Indian music point of view, I want to talk a little bit about the music. Right? Can I do that for 5 minutes, and then we'll try and cover that as well. I'm just going to lift the mic for people at the back. Can you hear me? Yeah. So what you're going to listen to now is what we call Indian art music. I mean, in the subcontinent, there's a whole lot of genres of music, from Bollywood to Sufi music to devotional music, etc., etc. This is called Indian art music, and it predates all of the other forms and genres of music that we find in the subcontinent. It's called melodic music, because 2 aspects of the music is melody and rhythm, and the music is purely melodic. So there is no harmony or counterpoint. It's each note is embellished, and that's where we have the slides, what we call meaned and so on, to embellish each note from above and below the note. A raga basically is defined as having a scale. It's got an ascending scale, a descending scale. Those scales don't necessarily have to be the same. They don't even have to be the same in number. But they are very specific to a raga, and you're not allowed to play any other note within that particular raga when you're exploring it. So there's 7 basic notes, as you know, as you've seen in the chart. And then in Western music, there's 5 more notes which are called semitones, right? So there's the 12-tone scale, if you like, chromatic scale. In Indian music, there are 10 more notes, which are basically microtones or quarter tones. And that makes it a 22-scale raga. So when we play raga, even though the 2 ragas have the same notes, they'll be different because of those quarter notes and how you use that. So this is where the lady's question really comes into being, where when you learn Indian music, you learn by singing. Because you can't learn those quarter notes on an instrument. It's just too difficult. So you spend a number of years singing with your teacher, and once you know how to sing these ragas, you can then try and apply it to an instrument. But singing is seen as the main instrument in Indian music. Okay. So what else can I tell you here? The music is spontaneously improvised, very much like jazz. There's a scale. Each raga has a personality, and you have to basically use the notes to reveal the personality of the raga. And the raga's personality would be described as, for instance, what I'm going to be playing just now is a raga called Basant Mukhari, a morning raga, perfect for this time. And it's basically, you could describe its personality as devotional, tranquil, and meditative, being an early morning raga. What else can I tell you here, very briefly and very quickly? So yeah, in terms of what a raga really is and how I should listen to it, in Sanskrit we say Ranjayate iti ragaha. So Ranjayate means that which colors, iti means thus is a raga, that which colors. So what we do is you encourage the audience to basically have a mind as still as possible, almost like a blank slate. And as you listen to the music, you find that some impressions and images are created in the mind, which at the end of a performance will leave you with an idea of the image and the personality of the raga. So that's how we listen to music. What is very interesting is that the piece that I'm going to play, and this shows the universality of music. The scale that we use in Basant Mukhari, which I'm going to play, is also used in Persian and Arabic music, where it's called Hijaz. It's also used amongst the jazz musicians, where it's called the Phrygian dominant. Jewish people will see this and call it the Hava Nagila scale, right? Same scale. In flamenco music, it's called Escala Andaluza, and then amongst the Greek bouzouki players, it's called Hidzas. So we have the commonality of the music where across a whole range of people we use the same scale. Thank you. In terms of frequencies, I can't really talk much about all of them, right? I know that when I play, there are times when I feel very different from other times, even though you play the same piece at the same time of the day. And I think it's got something to do with the frequencies and what they relate to. So the one thing I can tell you is that some years ago, I was practicing a midnight raga, around midnight. And something happened, and I got such a shock, I just left my instrument and ran away. There's something going on in that space. So I think for me it's more a matter of feeling and understanding what's happening through that feeling, right? And through the emotion, because music leaves emotional memory. And maybe when we meet again, we can do a bit of research and come back to you on that one. Okay, so Kirti.
I'll take this last question and then we're going to play the music, yeah. Yes.
I'm not familiar with the notation of Indian music. Is Indian music notated with rhythm or without rhythm?
Sorry?
Is Indian music notated with rhythm or without rhythm?
There are two sections really. When you play raga, the first section will be without rhythm.
Do you want to just...
Yeah, so the first section of any piece, any raga, is what we call an alap. And it's an introduction to the piece. It will show you the notes, the range of the notes. And it's got a lot of depth. It basically sets the scene for the raga. After that, we have an accompanist who will play the rhythmic aspect of the music, and he'll play in a particular rhythmic cycle, and what we call tala. So we have raga, the melodic side, and tala, which is the rhythm side. And there are many talas, from 1 beat to 108 beats. And there are about 5 to 12 that are very popular today. So my tabla player would have been here today, and I think you would have really enjoyed listening to him, but he had a death in the family, so at the last minute, so he couldn't make it, and I couldn't make another arrangement, otherwise would have had the rhythm aspect. Sorry about that.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to start with the music piece, and just to listen with awareness again, in terms of thoughts, feelings, and I'll have some questions for you after.
Also, we have a drone instrument that plays in the background that registers the tonic and just to keep your ear kind of tuned. We normally have an instrument on that, but you know, with technology, we nowadays use
Thank you, Rabin. Quick question, also leading question. How many people feel more a sense of belonging or feeling part of this collective after listening to the music? Yes, there was only one right answer. Thank you. What a musician helps us with is actually feeling connected to each other. So listening to music or playing music together creates these social bonds in a different way, has been shown to actually increase heart rate synchrony. So if we could measure that currently, we'd be in synchrony with each other. And this sense of synchrony has been shown to help us to function better as a group. So we make better decisions collectively, we get along better, we support each other in better ways, all of which is necessary for better health. But I think I'm also trying, if anybody is here, I'm trying to make a plug for me doing some work with the GNU. I think we can make them work more effectively by getting them to listen to music as a collective. But yes, this is the power of it. And we can use this then in our different settings, either work or home environments, to create a sense of synchrony with the people we want to feel synchrony with and help us to function more effectively in those units as well. We're going to close with 6 short pieces of music. Do you want to introduce it or should I just let them listen? Okay. So it's 6 different pieces of music, and what we'd like you to do is just understand whether these 6 different pieces of music do something different to you. Do you feel something different? Do you think about something different? Or do they all sound the same in essence? I'm not completely, I listened to some of it, but I'm not completely familiar with Indian classical music, so some of it sometimes can, sound very similar. But there are 6 different pieces, and even with no understanding of Indian classical music, does it actually evoke something different in you? I'm going to hand over to Rabin to play. Thanks, Rabin. want to say anything about those pieces, Rabin? Sorry, do you want to say anything about those pieces? So the music is actually for specific times of the day, as Rabin was discussing earlier. So each piece of music was actually for a different time of the day. Do you want to share anything on that quickly, or yeah?
So the whole idea about time theory in music is that if you look at any particular time of the day, the ambience is very different. I mean, sunset, the feeling and the mood and the ambience of the atmosphere is so different from noon, from late afternoon. And then sunset again kind of almost replicates sunset or sunrise, but it is slightly different, and so on and so forth. So the time theory of raga is that you are only allowed to play raga at that particular time. In fact, in North India, it's taboo if you play raga out of time. So you play raga at that time, and you try and create the personality so that it matches the environment and the atmosphere, and that's what makes it more a part of our being, and as we said, parallel to life itself.
Thank you. So who have I convinced to start playing a music instrument? Nobody? Rabin, can we come to you for Sarod lessons?
Anytime. Can I tell you that if you do come, and you're most welcome, you start by singing, okay? And you'll sing for at least 2 years before you touch an instrument. That's how it works. So please come.
I've been for one singing lesson in my life, actually. I went for a Springsteen concert, and I decided I wanted to be part of the E Street Band. And so I went for one singing lesson, and I will say this was the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life. My God, was it difficult to try and figure out how to control a vocal cord. Like, what? Who knows where they are? But it was super fun. I would highly recommend that you take up music or listening to music differently in your spare time. Start to play music. What I do in Brain Health is actually use music, use art, use different techniques to actually support brain health in different ways and for specific outcomes. So some for healthy aging, some for stress management or mental wellness. I'd welcome questions after this, so feel free to come up to me and chat. I do this walkabout. Normally we walk through the museum, and that depends on the group size, so I can't do it with a big group. And I do this once a month. The next one is on the 10th of August, and we will focus on women and our knowledge, the people who support us, and how we actually support health in many different ways. So I'd invite you to join me for that one on the 10th of August. My cards are available. Feel free to contact me. And Rabin, how do we contact you? Sorry?
Through Kirti. If you've got her card, you've got my card. Can I just say something about this? The 6 pieces that I played, the full piece that I played was, as we said, Basant Mukari, which is kind of early morning. So the first piece I played was a noon raga, right? The second piece was a late afternoon. The third piece was early evening, or sunset rather than early evening. The fourth piece was a bit later in the evening, call it late evening. Well, that was the fourth piece. Early evening, should I say. The fifth piece was late evening. And the last piece that I played was a midnight raga. So just to demonstrate the time theory of raga. Thank you. Thank you, Kirti.
Thank you all for coming. I hope to see you at the next one. I'll take questions. And also, before you leave, if you are happy to please leave us some comments on video as to what you actually gained from this, or what did you learn, or what would you like to learn next? We would just love to hear from you. There's also a feedback form, and if you could please fill out the feedback form and add your emails if you do want to be added to the email list. And we will be taking some photos for people who love to be in photos. I know I have cousins who love photos, so we'll be doing that. So if anybody wants to just wait for the photo, please do. I'll take a few questions. Yes.
Thank you. I'm in the
Excellent.
for many years.
Right.
I call yoga. I practice classical yoga.
Yeah.
There's so many modern forms of yoga.
Yeah.
My teachers go back to India.
Mm-hmm.
And yoga, dance, and music all put together. And what Rabin gave, the chakras and the foot and for me, I practice from time to time. I have a CD
can ignore them, neglect it.
I like to go for walks. We're one of the bird clubs, so I watch the birds and I watch the trees and the seasons, and then I go for my walks. Thank you for this lovely experience.
It's a pleasure, thank you. Yoga is not the only, it is one of the most integrated systems to support health in many different ways. It includes aspects of the physical and the spiritual and the mental, and looks at the integration of all. To acknowledge my yoga teachers, Mr. and Mrs. Ram, who are Rabin's parents. And so I've actually been doing yoga since I'm 8 years old. Sorry, I get emotional. Doing yoga since I'm 8 years old, so profound respect for the system. And actually, that's how I started actually looking at integration in different ways and how we actually look at these different knowledge systems differently. I was doing medicine and I was doing yoga at the same time. And the two systems don't always speak to each other. And so I had this stream of thoughts, 2 streams of thought at least, that did not agree with each other, but I was happy with both, you know. And I think that's actually shaped a lot of what I do currently, so thank you. Any other questions, and then we'll close? Yes.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And at the beginning, you mentioned various health conditions and Alzheimer's and dementia, and then you also mentioned stroke. How does that fit in? Is that just the music and the connecting having an effect on lowering blood pressure?
Music per se and stroke, I'm not sure. I'd have to look a lot more in terms of the specific research. But in terms of plasticity and how it actually supports plasticity, that is real. And stroke recovery, in part, is supported by plasticity. It's also about how we learn to do things differently. So potentially after stroke, how does music help us to heal and to recover, not just from a physical presence, but from, as we were discussing, the emotional and spiritual aspect as well. I'm not sure if anybody in the audience has insight on that as well, who would like to contribute. No. Okay. Oh, yeah, I'm out of time, but next time, I think we're going to have maybe next year all music sessions. The music sessions end up being the most popular, actually. But I wanted to also mention about mantra and sound and how they've been constructed for a specific outcome, again, within this knowledge system. And you get different forms of mantras in different cultures across the world as well. So there's a lot to actually unpack in terms of sound and health and the neuroscience behind it that we will actually do. And thank you very much. Have a lovely Saturday, and I'll see you the next one. Thank you. And thank you, Rabin. I hope we're going to do many more.
My name is Deborah. Just to say that was the most wonderful hour and a half, and so wonderful to meet a doctor who's open to other fields, and such as music, and it was just profound, the whole thing.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Sowersby. Well, the most fascinating thing was, first of all, listening to the Sarod. Got a brief introduction of Indian classical music, but not very much. I've learned piano all my life, and just the tones of this was just something so soothing. And I mean, I feel a different person from when I came in here and all stressed with traffic and everything. But it's just applying it to health problems, and particularly mental health problems, which is a big thing in my own experience and with patients that I've worked with.